What would you do if you found out that you accidentally had an illegal rental property and the city was expecting you to prove that you got permits done for work that you didn't even do and didn't realize wasn't permitted? That's the situation I found myself in when I first began my real estate journey in Baltimore. So this is the story of one of the first houses I bought in Baltimore. And I told the story before. I mentioned to you guys that I bought a number of properties sort of turnkey. This was in that set of properties. There's supposed to be minimal repairs, and basically the idea was we're going to purchase the properties, get them rented out. At the time, I was thinking I was even going to get them rented out on Section 8 vouchers, but essentially I was going to just do minor repairs and move the tenant in. So that's what I did with this property. Did minor repairs, moved the tenant in, and thought nothing of it. I actually thought I already had a rental license because I had filled out the application online on the city portal for a rental license. One day, while I'm thinking about something unrelated to this property altogether, my property manager calls me and they tell me that the tenant just let them know that they found a letter taped to the front door of the property. And the letter says that the property is unfit for habitation and says that it's been declared vacant by the city. So the tenant's concerned, they're confused and wondering what's going on and if we're sort of scamming them in some way. I'm concerned because I'm confused for that matter because I've never come across a situation before. But basically, what it turns out is that my rental license had never actually been issued. It's sitting pending in the city's system in their portal, but because it was never officially issued, I don't actually have a valid rental license. And the reason it wasn't issued was because the real problem in the situation was that my house had something called a VBN. So a VBN stands for a vacant building notice. And basically, in Baltimore City, what that means is that the city has identified the property as a vacant property. And the only way to get the VBN removed is if you go through and get a brand new use and occupancy permit for the property. It's one of the worst things that can happen to your property because all of a sudden the city is going to want you to get permits for basically everything that's in the property. So hot water heater already sitting there, they want permits for that. There's a new any type of modification of anything in the kitchen or even like installing of a new toilet, something that routinely people often do without permits. All of a sudden now you're going to need to get a permit for that. It's a list that the city basically keeps of properties that they believe are vacant. And the idea behind the list is that it's kept because they're trying to minimize the amount of properties that are vacant in the city. They want to sort of shame the owners or be able to take over those properties in long term through receivership or something like that. But regardless of the different reasons why they have that as a policy, it basically is a little bit of a kiss of death if you weren't planning to do a whole major renovation on the property. So to get that permit, you have to produce permits for every piece of work. But remember, I didn't do any work in the property. I just bought it. And basically, what I found out is the seller who had passed away, I bought the property from their estate. Basically, they had been doing a renovation in the property without permits. And I really didn't know at that time that I needed to check if the work that had been done on the property had been permitted or not. So now I've got a tenant living in this house that's just been declared unfit for anyone to live there. And it's literally now at this point illegal for me to be operating a rental property out of this unit. But I also have a contract for a tenant that says they have rights to be there as my tenants in the property. So I have to figure out how to get out of this situation. So the process was terrifying. In these situations, if the city comes in, they can actually require you to rip open the walls of your property for them to inspect all of the electrical wiring and plumbing in the property. Then you have to modify anything that they don't like that's in the property, even if it was to code when it was put in there, but is now not to code. So it can be a tremendously expensive process. I mean, it can be 10, 20, $40,000, and this was a house that I had bought for $110,000. So I was, needless to say, really, really worried about what was going to happen. It was a stressful period of time. So, as is the theme of so many of the stories on this channel, the way out was through. What I had to do was learn the entire process from scratch. There's a city portal. You have to make an account. You apply for the proper type of permit. You then have to wait for your inspection date to get scheduled. You have to wait for the inspector to show up on the date of inspection. They may reschedule on you. When they get there, you have to speak with them and understand what they're looking for from you. In my situation, I met with the inspector and I explained the situation that I bought the property already renovated. I didn't do any renovation to it, and I really didn't know anything about this whole VBN process. And generally, that I was just concerned about the whole thing, and I wanted to have everything done properly, but I was really afraid of what was going to happen because I felt like I'd walked into a situation that I didn't know much about. In these types of situations, the inspectors or people will take much more pity on you if they are of the opinion that you're going to be living at the property, if they see you as a homeowner. So that's sort of the route that I went with, framing it as I've bought this property and I'm going to be moving into it. And so I got lucky. He basically didn't make me rip open all the walls and all of that. He sort of looked around, made sure everything was generally in pretty good condition. And then the only thing he did require me to do was to get a permit for a small connection related to the electrical panel, which was funny because later it turned out that we had a Federal Pacific panel, and that's a panel that's known to basically now be a fire hazard. So the one thing that he did make me do actually missed the main thing in the house that probably should have been replaced, and we ended up replacing that down the line. In any event, we got the small permit, we got the use and occupancy issued, and we were finally able to have our tenant in the house legally. So it started off as a scary situation, but that house turned into a great deal. The mortgage is $760 a month. The rent is about $1,600 a month. The tenant pays consistently every month, and maintenance has been minimal. The lesson here is twofold. Number one, don't just assume your rental license has been issued. Confirm that it's been issued, because a pending license isn't the same as an active license, as I figured out. And then, secondly, you need to know the nuances of your local market. In Baltimore, this is just a key nuance you have to be aware of, and you have to have an opinion about what you're going to do if a property has a vacant building notice. If you end up in this situation where you don't have one and you already bought the property, everybody on the social media is going to tell you, "Oh, sue the inspection agent, sue the title company, sue your agent." But the truth is, there's nobody to sue. If you actually want to know that there's proper permits on the property that you've purchased, then it's up to you to verify that or to put in the contract that they have to pull permits. If you did have it in the contract, then you could sue the seller, but again, that's not the typical way that it goes. Now, I do have a point of view on what I do with VBN situations, vacant building notice, which for me is that I just don't buy them. I just don't buy properties that have the vacant building notice, and then it doesn't end up mattering whether or not the other people did work that was or wasn't permitted. I don't become responsible for their mistakes. So that's how I do it. That protects me. It's a little bit of a local market nuance, but the point is you need to know what the local market nuances are in your area so that you can make sure that you have a business plan that doesn't get gummed up by some sort of policy that you don't know about.